the Ausum podcast. I am Mayura Rao, and I explore what health and well-being means in our lives today. Stress and mental health have made headlines for the right and the wrong reasons. In the Indian context, talking about our mental health, a previously and still taboo concept, has been rising steadily. And this is good news for all of us. Our mind, like any other organ, responds to the stress we put on it. Talking about how our minds feel and seeking ways to address our mental wellness is slowly becoming normal and mainstream. On the other hand, as a nation, we're experiencing a rise in mental health issues that can affect all of us, from stress induced issues, general anxiety disorders, to serious issues such as depression. 70% of rising mental health issues show India suffering from stress and anxiety across genders and age groups. At Ausum, our conversations with our consumers are to get them to not normalize stress and to help them understand what stress does to them. The mind is part of the body, so it needs the same tender loving care we would give our stomachs when they're upset. Dissecting what happens to us when we're stressed and anxious is Priyanka Varma from the Thought Company. The Thought Company is working towards mental health awareness and care for all. Priyanka and her team empower individuals for providing not only therapy but creating a growing resource of reliable information on mental health and supporting networks and intervention strategies needed for people who are experiencing difficulties with their mental health. Priyanka Varma is a mental health professional who specializes in clinical psychology, counseling, and psychotherapy. Her experience spans over 10 years, where she's worked with a wide spectrum of the population. Along the way, Priyanka drew from concepts of self awareness and self acceptance that are now the foundations of a therapeutic framework. Her research has been on internet addiction, and she now focuses on how we can use technology to better serve emotional and mental health needs of people. So great to have you on this conversation, Priyanka. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Priyanka, I thought we'd start with something very simple, right? How do people perceive stress? What do you see from your research and some of the clients that you serve on how stress is understood by most of us?
Okay, so I'm going to dive a bit into the term stress and just the basic use of it in the English language. And I'm going to get a little nitty gritty about it, so bear with me. So to begin with, I want you and everybody to understand that stress is great for us. It is the reason why we show up, it's the reason why we perform, and sometimes it's the reason why we excel. So the way we understand things with the chemicals that secrete in our body, it acts almost like an activation for us to do something when we are stressed. But when we experience too much of this and it overshoots and we maximize and we are out of that optimal performance of flow, that's when it becomes distress. And that is what is bad for us. That is what is unhealthy for us. So to break it down to you, it's distress that is really, really harmful to us, while stress is good. And the way most of us understand it is actually through the lens of distress. That is, it's bad for your heart, it's bad for your skin, it's bad for your body. One of the worst things takes away clarity of thought, it takes away our health, it takes away the quality of life we can experience. So now to understand how we perceive stress, right? It comes from a different lens. Everybody perceives stress differently. It's not one standard thing that goes all throughout. It's what I may perceive as distressful. It could be very different from you. So, for example, doing this podcast recording could be distressful for me because, hey, this is not something I'm used to doing. But this could be something which is very easy and effortless for you because you do this very often. This is something you're used to doing. You bring people together. So this could be something extremely comfortable for you. So our perception of distress is unique to our own experience. And it got to do a lot with the fact of our fearing something, where a fear of failure plays a huge role into our experience of distress because we're worried about the outcome of it. We're worried about the process of it, whether we'll be able to do it or not. So it is unique to an individual, and it's something about what they want out of it, the way they are taking their experience from it.
Right. A lot of research has come through over the last kind of 5 to 8 years on what stress does to you, right? Previously, stress is just like a mental issue, but we now understand that it profoundly affects us physically as well. How do you see stress affecting our bodies and behavior? You started to touch on, our lives and our quality of living. Help us explain that a bit more.
So, distress comes under the umbrella of anxiety, right? Because when I'm distressed about something, it's usually because I'm worried about the outcome of it. And that worry takes away the clarity of thought. So, I'm going to start with the cognitive functioning. Your cognitive functioning is compromised. There will be difficulty in concentrating, focus, memory, and even ability to hold on of like a conversation and clarity of thought in a conversation with it. Physically, digestive issues, bowel movement concerns, you may urinate too much or when you are distressed. You may even tend to vomit because you're so worried about what's going to happen next as well. Apart from that, it can lead to diabetes, it can lead to difficulties with your heart. It could lead to, like I mentioned, digestive concerns, so difficulty even in like digesting your food as well. Body ache, difficulty breathing. These are just some examples of how it can affect your body. And then emotionally, if these two parts of my life are not there, which is difficulty focusing, difficulty upholding a conversation, or difficulty with my body, it's very hard for me to really connect with my emotions and be there 100% in relationships with others. And as a result of which, it leads to further breakdown in our sense of awareness of ourselves, awareness of what the other person needs from us, or how we can be present for them too. And the way we understand things at an emotional level also is compromised then. So to answer your question, it probably can affect every, if not almost all aspects of our life, if not handled or not managed well.
As you say it, well, it's classic, right? When you're feeling something versus like a physical symptom, there seems to be some sort of disassociation when it comes to it. What I mean by that is our bodies are our bodies, right? If you have a tummy upset, people will say, hey, lie down, drink buttermilk, go easy, like do all of that. But if you say you're feeling something, like you're feeling anxious, say while recording this podcast, typically the answer is get over it or, find a way around it. Why is there this disassociation between the mind and the body? It's part of the same system that works together, but we treat it very differently.
You know, well, we always want to get over it or like suck it up. You can do this, pull your socks up, you've got this, or don't worry, it happens to all of us. It's okay. It's probably because we don't want to sit down and deal with it. We don't want to understand where it's coming from, why it's happening, what is this context in that experience of it. So building up to one of your first questions is, what does our perception of stress mean? Where does stress come from? It's our perception. It's our context to things. And sitting down and understanding somebody's context, why they are stressed about this, becomes uncomfortable for us because that means opening some doors, some boxes of things we've neatly tied up and pushed under the carpet. And we don't want to do that. But to understand why a person is stressed means uncovering all those things. It means sitting and decluttering the way we process things in life. And that's something everybody does not have the appetite to do. It's our personal discomfort with it. It means discomfort of us holding our own emotions and holding emotions of somebody else's too. And that's why we tend to avoid it. It also could be lack of education, lack of awareness, the importance of emotional and mental health, and things which I think the media talks about a lot right now. But more importantly, I feel it's the discomfort of us having to sit down and deal with something about ourselves and our constant need to not engage in any of that and operate almost like emotionless beings.
Well, I've had first-hand experience of this. I was going through a very stressful situation once a couple of years ago, and I started to operate like a machine. Right? It kind of is. I told myself it's just easier to not think about things and just do, and then we'll unwind it. This happened, let's say this happened about 6, 7 years ago, right? I found that I'm still unwinding things because I didn't deal with things when it happened.
Yeah.
And it's taken up so much of time, energy over the last kind of 5 to 7 years. I wish I had done it at the start rather than operating like my brain was a separate entity to my physical body.
I'm going to layer this with you, right? Um, in a truly stressful situation, our mind and body knows exactly what needs to be done. So, for example, somebody I really loved, like, met with an accident, and I knew exactly what needed to be done. They needed to be rushed to the hospital. They needed medical care. They needed these doctors, these scans, these tests. These things need to be done. That was a truly stressful situation, and the mind knew exactly what needed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And like you, at that point of time, I sunk myself in work, because then that acts as a coping mechanism, because processing those emotions at that point of time was not possible for me, because I needed to probably do more than sit down and process at that point in time, because if I did, I would have collapsed. So, but it happened with the awareness that I have emotions that needed to be addressed, and I need to peel it away one step at a time and not do everything together. So, so what I'm going to say is, like, it's layered, right? So at that point, that distressful situation you had a couple of years ago needed you to focus at it, maybe. And then dealing with the emotions may require peeling back. But the difference is you're addressing it. You're not pushing under the carpet and then avoiding talking about it. It comes up, I'm seeing it, I'm talking about it. That's a healthy way of dealing with stress. It coming up, me tying a bow on it and pushing it under the carpet again is unhealthy. Because, yeah, at that point of time, me just sitting down and processing and working with it could be just a coping mechanism.
Right.
But me pushing it away, even though it pops up later, that's defensive, and there's unhealthy defenses. And that could be unhealthy ways of coping with stress. So, like I said, it's so layered. There's so many shades of gray with it, and you have to look at context with it. It can't just be cut and dry.
No, absolutely. I think for me, the telltale sign that I had pushed it under the carpet was I was sitting in a meeting and, I put my hand in my hair this way. I'm like, oh, my hair seems very smooth today. Then I realized it was my scalp and not my hair. And then I was working with who used to be a medical doctor before, and I was a consultant at that time. And I said, hey, can you take a look? You never let go of a free doctor, right? You're like, I have an issue, like consult for free. And he looked at me and he basically said, Mayura, you have alopecia. You have to stop stressing. Like, this is not going to work. My first reaction to that, I'm going to stress more because my hair is going to fall off my head, because I did a quick Google search to find out that alopecia could lead to permanent baldness, for instance. So there are some clear telltale signs. I found my telltale signs so much later. It took me 2 years to unwind alopecia, for example. But clearly there are some signs that one can recognize either within themselves or with somebody that they are with.
And I think it's a great thing you touched upon, right? Because I'm going to go back to my personal example, right? At that point of time, in that truly stressful situation, I was still eating properly, and I was still sleeping, and I was still exercising. So I was still coping well. But the basics of mental health come down to these three things: eat, sleep, exercise. And the minute you notice these things are going off, I'm sleeping too much, too little, eating too much, too little, exercising too much, or not exercising at all,
Right.
These are signs that your emotional health is getting compromised. And start at that very moment, speak to somebody, address it, journal, do whatever you need at that moment to address that distress you're experiencing in your emotional health. Because when I'm coping with something stressful, my eat, sleep, exercise will still be in healthy levels. When I'm not coping with something well and I'm pushing under the carpet, it's not like it's disappeared, it's still there. I'm just not addressing it, but it will manifest in different forms. Eat, sleep, exercise, you begin with that.
I think as you say it, makes so much sense. I was eating, except my scales were starting to tick over. And that should have been my first telltale sign that I was just operating at a level that I thought was optimum, rather than figuring out what was, how to cope with the situation. It took me 2 years of unwinding, 5 years after with a therapist, to really address what I should have addressed, perhaps closer to time. Um, I still think it's because people are either you don't pick up on your telltale signs that your body is telling you, hey, listen, there's something off here, or you're not listening to somebody or nobody's telling you.
And this also brings into something you asked me. This is the disconnect we feel with our mind and body. If I'm connected with my mind and body are connected, I will be able to recognize the signs sooner. I will be able to recognize, okay, this is not feeling right in my body, and let me sit down and address it. What happens is the disconnection that we experience, pushes us further away from us taking care of ourselves sooner. There were telltale signs in your body earlier on, but you probably brushed on the carpet for whatever reason it may be. Yeah. But the minute we're comfortable with that connection with the mind and body, the sooner we're able to address what's causing us discomfort, distress, emotions that we don't want to, conversations we don't want to have with people. It becomes easier if we're recognizing it in the mind-body connect. The body never lies. That's what they say. So whatever you're manifesting comes out in your body.
I'm sure this is a whole other conversation. Since you touched on it, I'd love to know more. How does one not fix, but how does one start to repair this connection? It may have lost because of a certain situation. Maybe we've had to operate like we talked about before. But now that you recognize it, is there a way to repair that?
There are many ways you can go about doing it, and I think that's you got to pick which one you're most comfortable with. And you may do this first, and you may do something else later on if you create your own script for that. But I'm gonna make a few suggestions as exercises you can do right now. One is meditate. Two is spend time only with yourself and listening to your thoughts. And three, my team members make fun of me for this suggestion all the time. But actually, like, touch yourself, like lotion yourself, touch your body, like, understand your body a lot better with it. And that's a really good way to connect with your mind and body with it. And these are exercises you can do regularly just to bridge that connection. Because what happens in these three exercises, you're sitting down and meeting yourself almost for a cup of tea, saying, hi, Priyanka, nice to meet you today in the 30 minutes that you and I are spending together meditating or having a cup of tea or whatever it is. I'm getting to know myself. But until unless I'm not consciously doing this initially, it's not going to happen. It has to become conscious awareness. And the word conscious means mindfully doing it, being aware you're doing it. And that's how you can bridge the connection between your mind and your body.
I love what you said. Taking that 10 minutes to check in with yourself is something that most of us rarely do. And we are I'm always multitasking, right? Sometimes I used to use my drive time to check in with myself, but sometimes you don't like your thoughts, you're like, don't want to deal with it. So I will start listening to music or start making some calls to basically invite distraction rather than to deal with the situation.
Yeah, and I mean, sitting down with ourselves is not always comfortable. It's very rarely comfortable. Let me rephrase that. But the more I check in with myself, the more comfortable I'm going to get with myself. The more I check in with myself, the more I'm going to understand people around me as well. Right. So something we always do at the end of therapy is that we check in with ourselves as therapists. How are we feeling right now post the session? Because that gives us insight to what emotions came up for us and also what emotions came up for the client. Right. And that will help us direct therapy better, will help us cater to what our clients needs better. So, checking in with yourself just doesn't do wonders for you, but also does wonders for people around you because you're then helping create and nurture healthier relationships.
No, absolutely. Actually, you've given me the perfect segue to something that I've been dying to ask you, right? When we're struggling with some of these kind of situations, we tend to beat up ourselves. Maybe we've fallen behind deadlines or done a less perfect job. We're kind of unhappy with our situation. And the things we tell ourselves are nowhere close to what we would tell a dear friend in the same situation. We are not kind to ourselves.
Yeah. And I'm going to jump a bit away here. So when I sit in therapy and I tell my clients, hey, you're not kind to yourself, and they're like, yeah, but how will I encourage myself to do better next time? If I'm not critical, how will I do better next time? And I want to do better next time. So I need to be critical on myself. I need to put myself to that amount of that stress. I need to put myself to that pressure to do better next time. And if I don't do that, I'm just gonna remain average. Yeah. So, one is that I do think feedback is important, but how I give myself feedback is most important. And this is where I dive into what is the difference between being critical and evaluating. When I'm being critical, I'm only looking at what I didn't do right. I'm not focusing on what I've done right as well. I need to evaluate myself better. That, hey, this is what I've done right, and this is what I can get better at. And that's the balance. At the same time, I cannot be toxic to myself and encourage toxic positivity by only focusing on what I've done right. Right? We need to have a balance where I acknowledge where I am, what I'm doing, the good and the not so good too.
Right.
And if I'm able to do both, see the good, see what I need to improve on, that's healthy self-talk. Which is, hey, Priyanka, let's say that, okay, I'm going to evaluate myself, that you brought in a bit about a fair experience in the conversation you have with Mayura today. But perhaps you could speak slower next time. That's an evaluation. But if I sit here and say, hey, Priyanka, you spoke too fast, nobody will understand you, you enunciated poorly, I'm not going to be encouraged to get on another call with somebody and have a conversation about this. And if I'm just being toxic to myself and only saying kind words that, oh, Priyanka, you got your experience as a therapist, that was great, that was fantastic, it's going to give good insight to people, I'm also creating a false sense because, hey, there is scope for improvement. So I think we need to understand that self-talk and especially self-talk when we're giving ourselves feedback needs to be focused on evaluating rather than being critical. Number one. Number two, it also has to become by asking yourself, is this evidence-based? So what proof do I have that this is real, right? And I'm using the example of me speaking too fast because I've got that feedback very often from people that I speak too fast. So, I'm okay, this is evidence by person A saying this to me. What is the evidence of even that being good feedback that you got in personal experience? Do you think that's helpful? Look for evidence to back up that kind of self-talk you do. And three, I'm going to say, this may sound a little cliche, but I think it's very, very important that you start being grateful to yourself for showing up for yourself. The gratitude element is most important. Only unless I'm not grateful for myself for showing up, will I be encouraged to keep doing things for myself. I need to say, hey, thanks, you did this. I know it was uncomfortable, but you did it, and thank you for it. That gratitude goes a long way with the kind of self-talk we do.
What I've also found is this kind of harsh self-talk where it lacks any self-compassion. It starts to lead towards low self-esteem. You start to lack self-confidence, and then you start to pretend, right? Then you put on a persona because you need to show up in places, but the critical self-talk doesn't show up as your authentic self.
Yeah, and I'm also going to say the critical self-talk doesn't allow you to be yourself, which also means allows you to take risk. It doesn't allow you to achieve what you're capable of. Now, there's enough research that goes back in it that those who are given negative feedback were less likely to succeed at a task than those who are given positive feedback, even though they started at the same level.
Right.
And I think that's the most important part, right? I'm giving myself feedback with the intent to do better. Or else why would I give myself feedback, right? And if my intent is to do better, the feedback I'm giving is most important, which means the good and the not so good. And that's one of the ways you show up for yourself with with honesty, right? Um, and that will feed into my relationships with people, because when I'm out there, I'm presenting confidence. For me right now is about being authentic, is that having the comfort to say, hey, I don't know this,
Mm.
or hey, you know what, I feel this way about something, or I think this way about something. And what we notice that in a lot of group conversations, in a lot of like boardroom meetings, especially with women right now, is that women often present themselves as being unsure, uncertain. And this is a result of systematic patriarchy. And we're not going to get into that. But, we very often women show up as being uncertain, unsure because they are told, or they lack that confidence in the boardroom. But when we present ourselves as saying, I don't know this, but with certainty, or I think this way with certainty, that comes from the comfort within ourselves. And that comes across as confidence. And that takes us further in life.
Wow.
It's all interlinked.
Yeah. And we always think about it more as like, oh, just have self confidence. But I love the way you say, what we tell ourselves is what starts to project in ourselves as well. Actually, you touched on something I was curious to find out whether we does gender play a role, and of course, our conditioning, what you just referred to, plays a role in self talk.
It does play a role. And I think what women are likely to be harder on themselves about are different from what men are. Before we got on recording this conversation, you and I spoke about the role for women as a mother, and the guilt they may carry as being a mother versus the guilt a man may carry by being a father. So all of this comes from what society expects us to do, what the roles we are expected to live our lives with. The woman's the one supposed to take out more days from work to be there for the child, as opposed to man. The way even the maternity and paternity leave design in our country is so different. And because of the way these systems are created, the kind of self-talk we give, like women versus men, is very different. Women will be hard on themselves for not being emotionally present for their family or their partners or for themselves, while men are more likely to give themselves negative talk about, not earning enough, not being macho enough, not being good at sport. So it does vary. But I am going to say the difference is reducing because of the awareness that's coming about. It's still there. It's still very much there. But the extent to which it was, say, probably a decade ago, is not as much.
This is really important, so I'm going to circle back to this. You briefly touched upon a framework for self-talk, right? Like, how do you encourage yourself to do better while, kind of toning out that toxicity that comes in the self-talk? Would you mind retouching on a framework that you follow for yourself, perhaps?
So I honestly want to go back to evaluation, that I will start by noting what I've done well in this. And what I've done well is something I can carry forward next, and what I can do better, right? And that's what I'm doing, a project-based self-talk. At the end of it, this is how I want to evaluate myself with it. But not the self-talk we do every day. And I just got to know about some, say, relationship in my life not going really well. I perceive that they're really upset with me. And I can sit here and I can say, hey, Priyanka, this is all your fault. Or I can sit here and say, hey, okay, I'm trying. What can I do now to get better? Which also comes from a place of being comfortable with yourself, which then comes into, I am being honest with myself about my emotions. So one, it comes in checking in with yourself. So the framework would actually begin with one, checking in with your emotions. How am I feeling at this point of time? Two, is that what do I want to do for myself at this point of time? And three, going ahead and doing it.
Okay. Before I bring this conversation to a close, I would love to ask you some rapid fire questions, get to know Priyanka a little bit more. A piece of advice that you cherish and a piece of advice that you should have trashed as soon as you got it.
The piece of advice I cherish was I don't know. And I'll explain that to you is somebody senior in the field turned around and told me that they did not know something and that released so much of pressure I placed on myself to show up and do it and know everything. The piece of advice I trashed long ago is that perfection is a reality. Because, hey, you know what? You got to roll with the punches. It's not going to be ideal. You got to make it work with what you have. And it's okay. It's going to be constantly evolving.
I like that one. Your morning routine. I know you're a new mom, but how would your ideal morning routine be?
My ideal morning routine would be, and it used to be, sometimes in some days I do have this till now, is I wake up, I either have a cup of tea and read the newspaper, or I go down for a walk for like 15, 20 minutes and then come back up and have a cup of tea and read the paper. Yeah, that's the ideal morning routine. Simple, I guess. Yeah. And in doing this, because it just feels most comforting for me to see the sunrise, or yeah, I love it.
That's beautiful. One thing that people get wrong about
you. One thing people get wrong about me is that I know it. I don't know shit. I don't know shit. So when people go around and come to me with advice, I'm like, mate, I don't know anything. So yeah.
You're clearly the confidant in disguise. Okay. What are your
occupational hazard?
Occupational hazard, of course. What are your stress busters?
Music, in particular Beyonce. I love it. Dancing to her or running to her. That is my stress buster. 2 is I will if usually stress is because of the problem in life, I will then take that problem head on. And nothing that just does it for me in that moment.
Putting it to rest. Oh, I haven't heard that one before. That's fantastic. Actually, you teed me up really nicely. A song that is your anthem.
Oh, a song that's my anthem. Yeah, I love all her songs. But I think, the one which, I'm very bad with names of songs, so bear with me even though I love her, but I think it's called Who Ruled the World by Beyonce. I think you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
That one. It's empowering for me.
Fun.
Yeah.
One thing you wish more people knew about mental health?
That it's okay. And by that I mean it's okay to feel all the feelings you have. It's okay not to show up all the time. It's okay to show up more often than you would like to. It's okay. It's okay to talk about it. I want people to understand it's okay.
That's a good one. Priyanka, this was truly delightful. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. I hope I answered your questions, and I hope that your listeners and your viewers actually have some insight that they can take forward to their lives. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. For those of us listening and who are inspired to seek help and know more about the Thought Co, please find Priyanka and her team at www.thethoughtco, that is THETHOUGHTCO.in. We're launching a series on Instagram and Facebook with the Thought Co on how to be kind to your mind. Keep your eyes peeled for this. Until next time, stay awesome.